Hello, my name is Alex Pennington, and we are the Aspiring Writers United. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Kim Taylor Blakemore. Thank you so much for joining me. I did
I
pronounce your
am
last name right.
totally excited. You did it perfectly.
I did.
Yes,
Okay,
it's perfect.
I swear I'm like
Yeah,
hit
yeah.
or miss.
But some people think it's Blackmore, and I'm like, whatever.
So, I see you have your new book that's
I
coming
do.
out.
I do. I'm being like really, here's my book back here. I do. So the Deception's coming out September 27th. So I'm super excited about
Awesome.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, your bookshelf is like on point, I have to say. I am like really impressed.
I spent much of the pandemic with my c- camera facing the closet doors.
Oh,
So I thought, if I turn my desk around, maybe I'll have a nicer view.
that's great. Gosh,
Yeah,
I'm glad we're starting to slowly move out of the pandemic.
yeah, most definitely. It's been for me in terms of research, it was taught me how to research well online,
Yeah.
but I really miss I like going to the places to
Oh,
research. So
where have you been? Out of curiosity.
I well, all three of the books, The Companion, After Alice Fell, and The Deception, all take place in New Hampshire. So
Okay.
I was able to go there twice and do research trips all around there and go to the historical societies. I went to the state library. I went to their archives. The state archives are intense in
Wow.
New Hampshire because they have records that go back to before like the 1600s. And
Oh,
so
dang.
when you go in, it's like something like, I can't remember, he said 90,000 cubic feet of shelves. And
Wow.
so I was looking for the companion, I was looking for very specific murder records of a
Mm,
woman who had been imprisoned at the same time as my character. So he went and he found the box, and literally all the counties would just throw things in boxes and send them to the state archives for hundreds of years.
that
So he
makes
found
sense.
it. Yeah, he found it, and that was amazing. Yeah, so I traveled all over there and talked to a lot of different historians. One guy was great. He was 80 years old, amateur historian outside of Keene, and that's where the books all take place in a town that's sort of an amalgam of
Mm.
Peterborough and Harrisville. For you New Hampshire people out there, you will know what I mean. Um, but he lived in that area, so he's like, "Well, come on over." And I went over and saw him, and he had maps laid out of the historical
Wow.
roads and what happened to all these little villages. And then he's like, let's get in the truck. So we get in this truck, we drive all over. At one point, we went up to the woods, and it was just, if you haven't been to New Hampshire,
Mm.
it's trees. It's more trees than the Pacific Northwest. It's amazing amount of
That's
trees. So
impressive.
you're completely, it really impressed me. And so you're in the forest, and he stops the truck in the middle of the forest. And, I've seen a lot of horror movies, and I'm not sure
That's
most
actually
of
what
you
I
have.
was just thinking. I feel like I've seen this.
Ah! And he said, look around. What do you see? And I looked at trees.
Uh,
and and there was one piece of stone, and I don't even know what it was. He said, this used to be a village, but when the
oh,
railway
wow.
came, it missed this part of New Hampshire. And this is what happened to all the villages that never got railroads.
Oh,
They just
wow.
disappear, and the forest takes them over again. So he didn't
Dang.
kill me. He was trying to show me
You did make
what
it.
how important the railroad was.
Mm.
In that time, it was literally the lifeblood when it came out, and they stopped using the rivers. The rivers were very big in New Hampshire for the mills. So
Wow.
that was really interesting. So a lot of stuff like that. And then I was researching this book that was set in Kansas. I'm still writing that book. Excuse me. Set in 1905 Kansas, and I was all set to go because
Mm.
the book is like a road trip. These two ex
Oh,
dance
that's
hall
cool.
girls are doing this road trip of vengeance all over Kansas and
That's awesome.
getting lost and doing all this stuff. And pandemic hit. So their route is literally done on Google Maps. I would literally go, okay, I think they're going this way. And I just take screenshots of the Google map
Yeah.
as you're walking down. It's pretty cool that you could do
That
that, right?
works.
That
I
you could,
mean, not
it works.
quite the same, but
It's not quite the same. And I may still go out there just to see, did I get them lost enough and put the river in the right place? So
right side is a river. Okay, we're good.
exactly. And then, but then you get really good at research beyond Google.
Mhm.
Obviously, don't do Wikipedia because it's useless for research. But I got really good at, I'm really into primary sources for my books. So if I'm looking up books about a period, I might start with
Mhm.
ones that are written now
Yeah.
just to get an overview, just to see where we're at. But that doesn't give me necessarily what people were like at the time.
Hmm.
So, okay, so then I say, okay, say the book cuts off in 1877. So the deception is 1877. It's right near the beginnings of the spiritualist movement. Um,
Okay.
so I said, okay, go find the newspapers from the area, pick a month this book takes place in.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted a lot of rain and some flooding and stuff. So I picked those months in New Hampshire. And I found the newspapers from the time. So you read through those newspapers, right? And you get an
Okay.
idea of what people thought was funny.
Yeah.
And you get an idea of what things cost and what was actually available. Like when I was doing the companion, Barnum and Bailey had not is didn't exist, but they brought over an elephant and they were taking an elephant all around the Northeast, right? So you're finding that things are like, wow, this is an amazing thing for the time.
Yeah.
You find super weird things like woman standing in her kitchen was shot through the head and died.
Oh,
And like
at
that's the whole
random.
article. You're like, hello, random shooting of woman in kitchen
Just a
in a village.
random.
Random, like tiny little thing between some big articles.
Yeah,
And
just a normal
then
Tuesday.
it's normal. And then, I started getting into the spiritualist newspapers. So like the Banner of Light was the biggest, but there was hundreds of them. So you start reading those for the same exact period. So you're sort of cross-referencing the type of people
What
that
kind of
would be in an
spiritualism were
area.
they into?
So the spiritualist movement itself
Mhm.
was based on the idea that we could communicate, we could part the veil and communicate with spirits,
Okay.
and that ghosts were all around us. So
That's
the
awesome.
spiritualist movement started in America and then England with these two girls named the Fox sisters. And
Hmm.
they were in their house in upstate New York in the 1840s, and they heard rapping everywhere. Oh no, this is crazy. We don't know. Mom,
Mhm.
what is this? We don't know what it is. And they started like communicating with these raps and taps, somebody in the house. And they got them to do yes and no, one rap, two
Mhm.
raps, right? And then they said, they got a little better. So people all over the town were coming to see them do this. And they're like, it is a murdered person, and the murdered person is in our cellar. So
Oh.
people are like, oh my God, we have to dig up the cellar. So they dig up the cellar. There's
Uh,
nothing there. There's a bone. There's like a toe bone. But they call this ghost Mr. Splitfoot. So their mom is like freaked out. There's
Blackfoot.
too many people in the house. She just can't stand it.
Mhm.
She sends the girls to their sister who's married in another town.
Mhm.
Like, you deal with them. I can't deal with this ghost thing anymore. And that sister, instead of going, I will take care of the two sisters, says, I see a moneymaker. So she starts being a spiritualist and she gets them on the stage and they become world famous. And literally from them, they were like the nascent beginnings of this movement that became parlor seances and then all the way up to big
Wow.
shows in theaters. And what really hit was the Civil War. So so many
Oh.
people died and so many people were mourning. They wanted to talk to their loved ones. So the Fox sisters, by this time, one of them, they both drank too much. They both had too much pressure to get the ghost out on stage, right?
Mhm.
So one of them renounced it. She got on
Oh.
stage in New York and said, we are frauds.
Oh,
I
okay. I was gonna
clicked,
ask, did they think they were legit or?
well, they kind of split off. So one of them said, we are frauds. And I clicked my toes to make that rapping sound. And she took off her shoes and her stockings and showed how she did it. She said all we did was learn how to like snap our toes, and then we strung apples and through the floorboards and would pull them so they bump up against the floor and sound like somebody walking. So she does it. She renounces it. her husband is like, oh, thank you, that's so good, because he's a Catholic, he's wanted her to renounce it. And the other one is like, I'm spiritualist, she's a jerk. And she kept going because her husband was a spiritualist.
Like, I'm
So
I'm gonna keep soaking this up. I'm doing good.
yeah. So at the same time they're doing it bred this sort of way. So you're looking at a part of New York that was called the Burned Out District. It had the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening. The big religious revivals were all through here. So we're talking people who are used to these sort of tent revivals and stuff.
Yeah.
And then
The
suddenly
classic.
this one comes in. It's like, whoa, now we don't just pray that there may be something, we're going to talk to them. So this just kept growing. And you can imagine at the same time, you have the growth of the frauds and the tricksters who say, I know how to do things with this. And they come up with their various tricks that mimic things flying around the house and glowing ghosts. Yeah, they used a lot of tricks. They had things called spirit cabinets. They would have people get inside and they'd tie them up, and then, oh yes, the medium will not move. And then the ghost will stop speaking. It's always the ghost that talks to the people. And
people
then
were falling
out of like black velvet would be these glowing faces. And basically they were just paper mache faces covered in phosphorus paint.
That's
right.
awesome.
So, but you do it out of black velvet, it looks like it floats. And
it looks
then
real.
if you're really smart, you do the seance in your house and you have a trick wall behind you, and you get a nice young woman who will climb through it and be the young ghost of somebody. So this continues to go on, and it becomes a very female centric sort of business at the time, because men thought the women have they have the opening to the spirits much more than we do. Yeah, exactly. So it was a viable way to make a living at the time. The back of the Banner of Light would have a medium come in, and she would listen for spirit letters. So like letters to the editor or Dear Abby or whatever, and she'd write them down. So it'd be like, my name is Moses Levi. I died in Kansas, and my wife is, I just want to tell her where the money is. And then another person's like, my name is John Morgan, and I was murdered by such and such person on this day. So you read these, they're amazing. But I'm like, wow,
that's awesome.
Crazy. So yeah, so then you get really good at like finding all that within primary sources. And again, I would say that to anybody writing historical fiction, you've got to hit into the primary: diaries, newspapers, letters. In this case, I found the autobiography of Mrs. J.H. Conant, who was a massively famous medical medium at the time, and a book called Confessions of a Medium. That was written in 1877, I believe. And it was a guy who was fully in England, who was part of the Church of England, very religious, was going to go into the church, and ended up being pulled and mesmerized by what the spiritualists could do, and how they did bring comfort and solace in what they did. And so he apprenticed with this guy. They start going on tour in the US, and he realizes the guy is just a bag of tricks. So the book literally tells you how to do the tricks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, so then I was doing a lot of that sort of primary source in that way. And then I said, now I've got a real medium and I've got a trickster in the book, Maud and Clementine. So I really need to make the medium be authentic. I don't want to pull off some Hollywood thing or whatever in my head. I see ghosts. I've seen them, but this isn't a ghost show. But somebody who could actually conjure them and know what to do with them. So a friend of mine said, you need to contact this psychic in Texas. So I did. And that was fascinating. I had an interview with her that was just amazing and mind-blowing. And then I was able to say to her, Maud hears things. And this, when somebody asks her what it's like, she says it's like putting a French horn to your ear and every note blown at once.
Wow.
And so she said, mediums see, hear, feel, interior. A lot of schizophrenics have a lot of that parting the veil. They can't, she says.
Interesting.
And okay, here's cool. She said right up front, she said, I just see around you this poor young girl that's just like covered in mud and dirt. And she's just like, terrified. And I said, that's
Oh
one of the
my God.
characters in my book. But she wouldn't have known it because
That's
nobody had
crazy.
seen it. I know, it was
Yeah,
on
only
my
you.
computer. I never share it.
Wow.
I give my book to one person at the end to
Wow.
read and give notes. So that was a
That
little weird.
that would
So
be
this, yeah, so I did
I,
that. And the really good thing about that was I got a message this week from someone who was a medium and said, you got that right. You got
oh,
her
that's
right.
cool.
So that was really good. And for the trickster for Clementine, I had all the stuff that people had
Mhm.
done, but I wanted to do some extra things. You know, she has these little
Yeah.
tricks, like she lights her fingers so they're lit. They have like candles, and she can go like this, and a
Oh,
ball of light will be in her hand. So I'm like,
that's
how did you
cool.
do that then? So I was like, who in the world would tell me that? So, you know, I'm on YouTube trying to find all this stuff.
Uh,
And it turns out I found a guy named the Historical Conjurer, and all he does is magic from the 19th century. So I grabbed an interview with him. We got online together, and I said, okay, Clementine does these things. Can she do them, and how? And he said, yeah, she could do that. She could do that. She could do exactly what you have. Make this thing happen because you're using the wrong thing to hang things.
mm,
I used catgut, and he's to make things float. He
uh,
said that won't work. You need to use horsehair tail. That will not reflect. And I'm like,
oh,
see, little things like that. So he
the
gave me
small
really cool
details.
small details, but I can't give away some of the magic secrets. I promised him that. So
So
that
have
was
you
fun.
like met one of these mediums or psychics who like you thought was legit besides like that one you talked with?
I thought she was legit, and I'll tell you in 2 years if she was, because she said some stuff that she said is later. It's going to be in the next couple of years.
Is it
But
good stuff?
she actually talked, yeah, really good stuff.
Oh,
But
good.
she talked about my grandmother and my brother who'd passed away, neither of who I have ever talked about on any internet in any way, shape, or form, and the way she described them and their relation to each other
Mm,
and what they said. And my brother and I had a problematic relationship. We were never very close. So she said, you know, he's saying something to me. And she said what it was. And it was a very my brother way to say something. And I went, yeah, that's him. So,
that's
so,
so
you know,
cool though.
yeah, and I met I have a friend who's also clairvoyant. So I talked to her
Wow.
too. And that was really interesting. And then I talked to another medium who I said, you are not real.
Really?
Not at all. Yeah.
What
I
was
mean,
the
I could just
giveaway?
Well, the giveaways are where things aren't working at all, but they keep trying to make them sort of work. And then she'd try and
Oh,
do those sort of hot reads, like, am I saying something that she could catch on to? You know, when they're,
like
if
tries
you
to
want,
get you to kind of give her the
yeah,
details.
exactly. And like, and you see that when mediums or psychics do big crowds, right? They're like, I hear a
Yeah,
it's John. Well, John and George are like both, you know,
pretty similar.
somebody can be like, my John died last year. You know, somebody in the audience is going
Give
to
them
know
some
a John who died.
information.
Yeah, but they're not all.
Okay.
So I call myself a skeptical believer
Mm,
because there's so much uh tricking
there's so many
trickery
frauds
involved.
out
And
there.
so yeah, and the woman I spoke to, she's it really involved in certifying mediums. So they have to prove they can do it.
How do you prove that?
She says they have to prove it physically. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to have
Hmm.
like spirit stuff come through their mouth or whatever, but it's how they relate to the people.
Mm,
And I'm not sure how she's going to do it, but she said they're doing it because there's too much fraud in the
I
business.
could see that. That'd be a pretty serious issue to have. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
which I feel like most people think mediums are probably fake. Like it seems like
Sure.
that's an image issue.
It's so close to magicians, right?
Yeah.
So, and some of the tricks would cross on stage, things they would do, a
Mhm.
lot of stuff with mirrors. And you know, if you watch any of those YouTubes of Disney and how they use mirrors, those are
Oh yeah.
all like old tricks from the 19th century of how to use mirrors to make things
Making
trick your eyes. Yeah.
I'm just
Like
thinking
most of
like
the haunted houses mirrors,
exactly. They do that a
right?
ton and just like
Yeah.
walking through a lot of areas, you'll see like a psychic just building. And it's like
Yeah.
they'll be kind of sketchy looking, like, that doesn't
Yeah.
quite look legit.
Right. So it's almost like if you want to, there's past life conferences you can go to, but if you're
Oh,
like, I really want to try this or explore it,
mm,
I would look at their list of people coming because these are people
that's
who've
cool.
got the good mojo, right? Have done it a few. few times around the block.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of online research.
So how did you like? When did you start? When did you decide you first wanted to be a writer? Maybe you can kind of walk us through your story, because I mean, you went from writer to getting an agent to publish. You've kind of done it all.
Yeah. So I have sort of two sections to it. So a long time ago, I don't know, pretty long time ago, about 20 years ago, I had moved to Boulder and it was snowing. I'd moved from California to Boulder. It was
Mhm.
snowing. I had nothing to do and I don't ski. So I was in the house, like, what am I going to do? And I just thought, write a book. You always go to bed
Mhm.
thinking of stories. So why don't you just write some story and see? So I started writing a book, and I really like history. Obviously, all my books are historical. And so I started writing about a young girl in the Depression in Colorado, and I really liked it. And I interviewed people who lived there at the time and lived in Eastern Colorado. Really, really fun to do that. Denver has really great museums. So I went there and I wrote that book, and I actually worked with an editor from Writer's Digest because they
Oh
have an
wow.
editing program. And he lived in Israel, so I'd send the book to him by mail, and he'd send it back to me. Um, and it was great. And then I sent that out because I got at that time you didn't have internet like we have. It was sort of the nascent part of
Oh,
it.
the
So it was
dial-up
you had
kind of
the
stuff.
the big writer's market, yeah, dial up,
Mm,
the writer's market book, and I went through and I found some agents. I found 23 agents, and I got my book all wrapped up and mailed them out. And
that's
I
awesome.
didn't hear or heard no's from 23, and the 24th one called me, and he said, "Hello, I'm George Nicholson. I'm from the Sterling Lord Literaristic, and I loved your book, so I would like to represent you, and I want
Wow.
to talk to you about it." So that book and Bowery Girl were both agented by him. He was a young adult agent, but he had been the founder of Yearling Press. He was an editor his whole life. And then his friend Sterling Lord said, "Hey, George, you've told me all these years how the authors get screwed. Come be an agent." So I don't think he said it in that format, but that idea.
Something like
And so
that.
George said, "Sure, I'll come do that." And so he became a young adult agent. And the wonderful thing about that was my beginning. That was my first book. I didn't know what I
Mhm.
was doing, right? And because he was a real editor, we had the back and forth edits as if you were with an editor in a
Oh, that's great.
publishing house. And then we got it into a place, and then he sold it to HarperCollins Children's. And then I wrote the beginning of Bowery Girl. Again, I still knew nothing about this industry. I wrote the beginning of Bowery Girl the way I liked it. It was a very different opening then. Sent it out to that editor and got like a 4-page single space letter back about what she didn't like about it. But if I wanted to change it, she'd be happy to look again, which was totally valid for
That's
her to
great.
do, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do what she wanted to do. So I told
Wow.
him, let's take it somewhere else. And then he pitched it to Sharon November at Viking, and she bought it. So that was sort of my young adult place, and
Wow.
I did that, and it was really fun to do those, but I never wanted to write young adult.
Mhm.
And George and I, unfortunately, he's passed on
Oh,
since then, but he and I used to go back and forth about Bowery Girl because I always thought it was an adult book,
yeah.
and he said it's young adult because the character is 16. It's her
Oh,
viewpoint, and I said
yeah.
it's still an adult book.
Isn't it funny
So
how like it works out? It's all about the age and not really the content as much.
he actually explained it very well. He said it wasn't just the age, it's the worldview. It's
Oh,
the worldview, and I still
that's
said it's adult.
hmm,
So we had this thing.
that's
So we had
interesting.
I know, we had the publication party at the Tenement Museum. I really wanted to have it there, so I called them and said, "Can we have this party here and a reading?" They're like, "Sure, that's great." It's a wonderful place in New York. If you've never been, go to the Tenement Museum. Um, and so, but then they called my editor and they're like, "We didn't know where to place the book. We didn't know. We're fighting. We don't, half of us want it in young adult, the other half want it in the adult section." She's like, "Put it in both. What is the problem?"
Yeah.
Right? But I wanted to go, "George, see,
See, it's not just me who thinks
see,
this is young
not
adult
just me."
or that
Yeah,
thinks it's adult.
exactly. And then I didn't want to write young adult, and I didn't know what I wanted to write. So I just kind of kept writing. And then
Mhm.
my job changed, and I became a dean at a business college. So
Oh
that
wow.
sort of took over a lot of time.
Mm.
And I was still working. I was facilitating workshops with a group in Portland called PDX Writers, and
Okay.
still working and trying to come up with stories through like years. And this one girl kept showing up, and I'm very much into visuals, like in my head. If I see an image, I'm like, okay, I
Mm.
see the stories always cinematically. So I
Yeah.
had seen really early a woman alone in a white, stone and white painted cell with light on her and just one single
Wow.
chair. And I looked at her in my head,
Mm.
and she turned and looked at me and said, "Stories move in circles." And I was like,
That's a good line.
"What does that mean? What is this?" But okay.
That's
And then more things
interesting.
came, and then I started sort of writing her and sort of exploring what she was. And another
Mm.
image came about her murdering someone, like strangling someone. And I didn't use that in the book, but I was like, what is going on with this character? Then I put it
There's
aside. I kept
something
going, well,
there.
yeah, I kept saying that I'm not ready for this. I'm not good enough writer for this, whatever this book is supposed to be. But that line, story moves in circles, kept staying in my
Circle.
head. And then I decided I did some short stories, and I did one that was on an all-female jazz girl band
All
that
female
in the
jazz girl band.
1930s. Yeah, in the
That's
1930s,
cool.
they were big, and they
Mm.
would go town to town
Oh
and
yeah.
play for the radio, right? So
Uh-huh.
I thought, oh, this would be a really fun story. I don't really know what genre to write in. So
Mm.
I took everything I had about all these notes and all these characters, and oh, I'm going to do the super fun road trip, and went to a workshop at the beach. The first prompt of the 3-day thing was describe your main character as an animal, not
Oh.
like describe them as an elephant or something, but as if you're in the animal's eyes
Yeah.
looking out. And I'm like, oh,
Okay.
okay, the lead of the jazz band. And I start writing, and it was totally the character from I'd been writing before, the girl who
Oh,
was in the
that's
prison
funny.
cell. And all weekend, her voice came out, and I said, I guess I'm supposed to tell this story now.
Like this is the
And
story I'm wanting to
this is
tell.
the story. So that ended up becoming the companion.
That's awesome.
And as I was writing it, I really believe in deadlines. And
Yeah.
they really work, even though they're hard to do when you set them yourself. And for this book, I had no agent. I knew it was like gothic historical thriller somewhere in there. I kind of knew where it sat.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a deadline to finish this book. And I gave myself that deadline. I said, I'm going to give it 2 more weeks after that to my friend who's going to read
Mm.
it over and give me notes. And then I'm going to send it to agents and then see what happens
Yeah.
from that moment. So I hit the deadline, which was great because it showed me, who'd been lollygagging around with this book, that I could finish it within a
You can
specific
actually
amount of
finish a
time.
book or this
Yes.
book.
Yeah. And then I gave 2 weeks for the edits that came back from the notes. That happened. I sent, I was absolutely clear of my calendar. I had who I was going to send the book to, the agents.
Mm.
So I got some rejections. I got some ignoring. I got some couple really, really weird emails, but like the kind are like, your book is so bad, I'm going to put it in my letterbox. I don't know.
Wow,
That's not what
that's
they said, but
nice.
that was the intent. It was the intent of one of the
Those
letters.
kind of emails.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's fine. And then I sent it, and I got an agent. I did get an agent. It was really weird. I decided to send it to Mark Gottlieb at Trident
Mm.
Media, and he emailed me like 2 days later and said, I want to talk to you about the book. I want to represent your book. And
Wow.
then so I talked to him on the weekend, and he was asking me about the story and doing, all
Mm.
that. We were going back and forth on story and some of the characters, and he went to see how it would do. And he said, if you give me permission, I know someone who would like this book. So
That's
I did
awesome.
it in an email. He sent it out. And between agent and sale was 6 weeks, getting an
That's
agent
really
and a sale.
fast.
And it took
Wow.
3 weeks to get an agent for when I finished the book and sent it out. So 3 weeks for
That's
that, 6 weeks
fast.
for that. It was very fast. So of
Wow.
course I had now my writing career is going to be smooth and perfect. And we know it's not, right?
No,
Um, but that was wonderful. He sold it to Lake Union, and I adore them. They've done all 3 of my books. So
that's great.
yeah.
What was
So
your kind of hook for getting, like, I'm assuming you wrote a query letter?
I wrote a query letter, and before that, I'm a member of Women's Fiction Writers Association,
Okay.
and they have this incredible program where you do uh, pitches. You learn to write a 55-word pitch that you
That's
fit
awesome.
into your query letter, because the query letters are pretty much cut and paste what you put in, what
Yeah.
you've researched your agent, obviously, so
Mhm.
you can talk about them. You talk a little bit about the book. The next paragraph is your pitch.
Yeah.
Next paragraph is what you've done and your awards. Next paragraph is, please, I'll send you whatever you would like, 10 pages, manuscript, whatever, kind of like that. So what they wanted to do was to have a very, very tight pitch. So you worked on that.
That's
You worked
smart.
on your pitch for that. So once I did that, and I literally did that in between two sets of agent searches.
Oh, wow.
So that new pitch went into the next set, and I was getting requests.
'Cause I know Mark, his thing is having a good pitch and a good hook.
Hmm.
That's like
Hmm.
I've attended one of his classes, and so how do you what makes a good pitch?
That's so interesting. I think the biggest thing with the pitch is making sure you're clear what the stakes are for the character.
Okay.
So, if I say, let's see, let's make something up. Let's make something up I'm researching. So I'm researching my next book
Okay.
right now, which is
Mhm.
true. So let's see if I can really mess this up and mack it up, because
On spot pitch for
I
your
don't have
new
a pitch
book.
for it yet, right? Pitch for a new book. So if I was talking to you, I said, "Oh, I'm doing a book, a World War II historical thriller.
Mhm.
It's about the German resistance." That's not a pitch. It's just kind of telling you
That's
what it
what your book
is,
is about. Yeah.
right? But if I tell you the book is about two women in the German resistance, one is a Jewish woman who was hiding in Berlin in 1942, and the other is the wife of an SS officer who ends up helping her get Jews out of Berlin.
Okay.
That's a different story. So we're
That's
starting
some
to
pretty
build
high
the pitch, right?
stakes.
Then you have high stakes. Now I didn't now
Okay.
that obviously you can add on to that and make it sound very movie-ish, but that is your pitch.
That's like a sentence too.
Yeah, it's
Or like
one
a sentence.
sentence.
Yeah, yeah.
One sentence, and then
Okay.
you could add on to it, but that's really, if you can just glean to that sentence, it's
I feel like that
great. So
gives
I'm
you a
still
good
playing with
visual
that.
too of like what that is.
I agree. And I think what it does too is, I think when the reason I haven't written the book, I'm still researching it, and I'm trying to put the plot together, and which characters are going to
Yeah.
twist and betray, and what's going to happen
Mhm.
in it. But I think about that pitch because it's really important. It's a roadmap for you.
Yeah.
So when you're like going off on some tangent, you go, does that relate to that
Is that
pitch?
actually part of the
No.
story?
Yeah. Is it part of the story? So it's like you've got some clarity right up front before you start of what you're trying to communicate.
I read a lot of like how to write book, like Save the Cat and stuff.
Hmm.
And that's actually like always what they say. Start with your pitch, your hook,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
build on that and like grow your plot and your characters out of the hook.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love Save the Cat. I think that's a fantastic book.
My
My
editor actually
very,
just turned me on to that. She
yeah,
edited my book. She's like, you need to read this. And then I read that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing.
I put it in Plotter. I don't know if you use Plotter,
What's
which
that?
is it's this amazing software that lets you plot everything, and you can move scenes around
Oh,
and slide them all over the place. So
I
I
might
have
have to
that
get
up on
that.
one side of my screen and Scrivener on the other, so that I'm really watching that plot as I'm writing away in the
Okay.
weeds. Over here is the story. So I can
So
go,
that was my
oh,
next question. You are an
yeah,
outliner then?
no, I'm
Really?
not. No, I'm not. What
Wow.
I do is I try and have some spine. So I have that sort of pitch, as I said, right now, I'm
Okay.
just sort of like trying to figure out my pitch for this new one
Hmm.
I'm doing. So the spine of it will be like, I want to know an opening shot, like a movie.
Yeah.
So I already know what that is for the new book. Okay, I can get her right into, we're going
Hmm.
right into the action. And I'm trying this time to be a true thriller, like 5-page
We're
chapters, really
talking
tight
James
writing.
Patterson.
We're talking James Patterson, Alan First, all those guys. That's what I'm
That's
aiming for.
awesome.
Because you got to aim higher each book, right?
Yeah.
So, or if sort of something a little more challenging than you did last time, or what you want to improve. And one thing I want to do is make my books tight, 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 tight. So
Oh,
even though
that's
they're
cool.
historical, they don't, there's still, it's the story that's going to run through. So
Mhm.
I will look for keep looking for my opening image, and then I want to know what the end is, which may change a little bit,
Yeah.
but I want to know where I'm going,
Mhm.
right? So if I want my characters to go to Miami, I don't want them to end up in Duluth, right? So
Yeah.
there's my there's
There's
my
your
thing, whatever that is.
direction.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, it's a thriller. I got to have a sacrifice at the end. So who is going to die and who's going to sacrifice something and who's the hero? Who of
Okay.
those two
Yeah.
women is the hero in this story, right? So I will put those two in plotter and then start thinking of those big things. What's the turn that's going to throw them into Act One? What's the horrible thing that's going to get them into Act Two? So this is how I love to look. And it's a book by James Scott Bell. It's called Write Your Novel from the Middle. This is
Write your
my very, very favorite writing book.
write your
Write
novel
your
from.
novel from the
I'm
middle.
I'm gonna make a note of that because I
Yes. And so it's very short, it's very practical. But what he does is instead of looking at that sort of rising action storyline,
Mhm.
he says, draw the Brooklyn Bridge. So he goes, now this is the story. So you have the beginning where you're like, it's all, you're
Yeah.
learning about people, and then you stand on top of that first pillar. That is your point of no return. You get kicked off. It's reactive, right?
Mhm.
Somebody's done something that kicks you off that pillar, and then you're rolling in chaos
We're
down to the
going
bottom.
down.
You're
Okay.
going down. So it's all very reactive, and you're trying to stop it, trying to do things like that. But it's all really just, oh my goodness. And then you get to the bottom, it's like, then the character goes, I have to get myself out. I have to get myself up that side. So then the story becomes proactive as they say, what's my plan to get up there? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going
Okay.
to save somebody? What am I going to do? So it's a lot of how they get up, and then they get up to the top, and that's your climax of Act Three. And then you have the lovely end,
That
right?
really does sound like kind of save the cat method
Yeah,
in a
very
sense.
similar. It's very similar to that. It's just I literally will draw that before I start. So
That's smart.
I wish I'd brought over, I could do visuals with all my little
I'll get a chart.
notebooks. Get my chart. Yeah, I put them in little Moleskine journals, and they'll start
Ooh,
with that.
fancy.
And then I start marking out what are the things that are causing this. So those I'll put in plotter
That's a good
and
plan.
see and what are some things that'll happen. I'll be like, oh, I need this guy she thinks he's a good guy and he's not. Or, I need this guy to work in the underground. Who is he? I don't know, but I need him to do
He's
this thing.
someone.
He's someone, but I'll start in plotter kind of laying those in. This happens,
Okay.
right? So that's
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 really
that's where I go from that. And I talk every time I do something, I talk to Mark. So when I have an idea of something, I
Mhm.
call him and I say,
Okay.
I don't know, should we do this? Should I pitch this? And I'll sort of talk through some stuff I've been
Yeah.
reading because he loves history anyway. So I'll
Mhm.
be like, hey, I found these three murders that happened in Connecticut in 1880. I was thinking about doing these. And he'll listen and we'll talk through it. And I'll be like, hey, I was thinking about doing this cop thing in 1950s Monterey. It's a guy. He's like, no, no, guys, it's not.
No
Women are,
guy.
yeah, it's women, strong female protagonists right now. So he's sort of
Yeah,
like
I could see that.
strategically showing me and
Yeah.
allowing me to try stuff.
It's good
And
to lean into
nothing.
those trends. I mean, he has like a bird's eye view from it, kind of.
He has a bird's eye view. And so, and that's why I finally said, I got to write a World War II book.
Yeah.
That is the trend. But the reason why is nobody's done what I'm writing about. Not in the
Mhm.
US, maybe in Germany they have.
Yeah.
So, so I'm like, okay, that's a niche. That's a really good thing to talk about that people can learn a story about and follow this
Uh,
great thriller, right? Because I'm not into learning and theme and all that. If they turn the page, I'm happy. You like the book? That's good. You have two good days. Don't think about your work. That's great.
I I was working on a fancy book that's like a World War II allegory. And I got really big into the psychology behind the Second World War, like how
Hmm.
this horrible stuff actually happened, and just
Yeah,
it's such a fascinating topic.
it is. It is. There's so much to it. So much. Yeah. So yeah, and so he'll lead me, he'll guide me, and he'll be like, "That's good," and it's not. I love to say, "Oh, I got an agent and I sold my book and I've sold 3 books to Lake Union and
Mhm.
life is good," right? Well, everybody has ups and downs in that. I've also had 2 books passed on by them. So, and I
Oh,
don't, I am in a luxury place in that I don't have to write the whole book. I can write a synopsis and some
yeah.
sample chapters. So I don't, have to invest too much except
Okay, you
my
don't have to
ego.
completely commit months
Yeah,
of time.
months of time to. But I mean, it's still, you're like, why don't they like that book?
Why?
Why
It's so
me?
perfect. Look, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, so I
great.
have like a couple days after that, I'm like, oh, you should do something else with your life. And then
I'm not
pick
meant to be
myself up,
right.
I find another story and could keep going, Robert Dugoni says that too, and he's got like 2 series right now, and he said he just wanted to quit at one point because
Yeah.
nothing was hitting, and then it did because he kept
Suddenly, it just
going.
takes one to, like, make you really break out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, yeah,
That's awesome. So, in your newest book, where did this kind of idea come from?
was looking for different cultural things that were occurring in New England. The Companion took place in 1855, After Alice Fell 1865, and The Deception is 1877, because I wanted to kind of do uh,
Yeah.
decade switches in the
Oh, that's
same
smart.
town.
Mhm.
So in each of these books, there's little Easter eggs to the other books, so you
Oh,
can
that's
find them all
cool.
over, which is really fun for me. Nobody else will find them, right? But I'm like, I know
But
where they're at.
now, surely there could be some historian who can pick up on these and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is genius." Like, I feel like that's the stuff that really gets writer or readers excited.
Yeah, sure. So so I really was just fascinated by it. I'd come across the Fox Girls.
The
And I'm like,
Box
this is
Girls.
crazy. And I want to do 1877.
Mm,
So what happened? So then I like started reading some of Houdini's stuff, who was much later.
that's
Um,
right.
and then I just kind of got into this idea of the mediums and magic
Mhm.
and how it worked in Victorian theater and stuff. And then I'm like, I think I can do a story. And I think the story is about ethics. I mean,
Ethics.
if
Oh
I
yeah.
don't necessarily know my theme right away.
Mm.
With After Alice Fell, I did not know what the book was about. I turned it in. I'm like, this is a good book, and it's got an incredibly beautiful story about the 2
Mm.
sisters in it, right? And it's
Yeah.
a mystery. But it wasn't. I was talking to a podcaster who had given me the most intense questions. She'd read the book. It was all dog-eared. She had these like specific questions. I was reading things, and I hadn't seen the book for a year, right? Because it's a year before I turned it in, and I was like, wow, oh yes, yes, yes. And my head is like, where is that in the book? Where is that in the book? Where is
Of
that in the book?
course I did that on
Of course,
purpose.
of course, I knew your book. The theme was atonement, right? Uh,
This book has
Yeah,
a theme.
yeah. What theme is that? And I'm like, what is it real? What do you think it is?
What do
No,
you
it was
think?
great.
You're
It
the
was
reader.
that
You
was
tell me.
exactly. That was a really good interview. But anyway, so I was really, really thinking about what happens if a mourner goes to a séance and they
Oh.
gather comfort and they talk to
Mhm.
someone from their past, who's so
Yeah.
close to them. And they walk out and they feel that solace
Mhm.
and it makes them feel good. Does it matter if it's authentic or not?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right?
That's good. Yeah.
So, so Clementine in the book, that's what she says. She says, what does it
Ah,
matter? Which way it's the
yeah.
means, the
Their
means and the
lives are
ends.
better now.
Yeah,
Kind of.
exactly. Their lives are
Yeah.
better. I'm doing a good thing in life. And then that starts creating that sort of ethical problem that occurs in the other character, and how when you do things like that, what it does to a person when they
Yeah.
start, you know, not being authentically true.
Now I'm guessing kind of what divides the sisters, right?
That's what divided the Fox
Yeah.
sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe I just kind of glommed onto that of those two and said, well, I'm going to make it my 2 characters that are different.
Well, such a good
So
conflict to have. Like, that's a
yeah.
pretty deep and personal conflict.
Hmm. And yet it's still a fun, like, gothic-y thriller. So
Yeah, it has that
that's
gothic vibe to it. And
yeah, yeah.
whenever you said New England, the first thing that popped in my head was like John Dee and Edward Kelly. 'Cause, like, England, they really did get big into spirituality.
In England,
Yeah, like the Queen and stuff was summoning them, and well,
not this queen.
No, 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 no,
Victoria.
no.
Victoria was.
Yeah. That's what I was
And
thinking
Mary
of.
Lincoln here, she was
Yeah.
way into it.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's a picture of her with the ghost of Lincoln behind her by this guy named Mumler. So Mumler used to take spirit photos so people would have like
Oh my,
their ghosts around them. And he got hauled into Congress for fraud
oh my
because of
God.
like, Mary Lincoln just was Lincoln's there, my husband's right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That'd be so weird to get a portrait of someone dead like that behind you, though.
I went to I was going to do a book called Penumbra, which was going to have a woman who did
Mm.
daguerreotypes. So I went to a guy in Portland who still did them with the camera and the whole process and everything. And it's fascinating to do. I was like, you're going to blow up your house, but he had this whole studio in his basement, and he's like, well, you want to be careful about this chemical and this one and this thing and that. He's like, I am not coming to your house. I'd be like waiting to leave, right? Like if
Mm.
we breathe wrong, it's going to blow up. But
Yeah.
it's fascinating to create. And he showed in the camera use how you could do that, how you could create that ghost of an image. Then there is, and it's basically it's two in. So you put the thing in that has we did tintypes at this point because so we put the tintype in the
Uh,
camera, and then you do your timer where the lens is open, close it, somebody else comes in, do the lens open, close, and then then you do it. Then you put it in all the chemicals and it's on tin, and that's what it looks like.
dang. And
Yeah.
so, like, Mary Lincoln, she probably didn't know. Like,
She
she
didn't
saw it
know.
was
Mumbler's like
legit ghost.
legit. And Mumbler to his dying day said he really filmed spirits.
Wow.
So obviously but this guy showed me how to do it. He also showed me a picture because pictures are motion at the time was very hard to catch. So there was this
Yeah.
boulevard in Paris. There's a very famous picture of an empty boulevard in Paris and
Mm.
very, very early in photography. And there's nobody on it. And he said that street would have been absolutely packed with people and sellers and cars and carriages and
Mm.
horses, etc. But they are going so fast, the lens of the tintype cannot see any of them, so it does not even capture them. Yeah. I'm like, what?
There's so many ghosts there. You can't even see the ghost.
I know. I'm like, I need to do that. So I may go back to him and go down to like the freeway with his camera and
Mm.
test it and see if I come up with an empty freeway.
Oh,
Wouldn't that be
careful.
fun?
You're gonna have a career as a medium.
It's so fun though. It's so fun to meet all these people. I mean, I needed to know timetables for trains from 1905. Where the hell? Oh, it's YouTube. I can say hell, can't I?
I think,
Where
yeah,
the
you can say
hell do
that.
you find timetables from 1905, right? There is literally an organization that's into timetables, historical timetables. So I call them. I'm like, I'm writing this book. I need a timetable from 1905. This train, it needs to go this place. It's like, okay, here's the link online. Another one, I'm like, I need to know about a Ford Model A, the first one that was done in 1903. There's none that exists except in the Ford Museum. And they sent me to a Ford guy.
That's so awesome.
I know. It's amazing.
Well, and like, there's these people are probably just like dying to talk about this stuff too. I mean, the ones who are
Well,
like super into it, like,
yeah. Yeah. This other guy, I'm like, I need to know about a carriage and a specific carriage that I needed to go in after Alice fell. He's like, that carriage? Well, the factory was right there in Manchester and there's 14 of them left. Now, which one do you want to see? Do you want to see the one that's got 8 horses? Do you want to see the one that carries 16 people, 4 people, 8 people? Because I'll take you all around the state because they're all privately owned. So we'll just drive together and go see them.
that's so
And
awesome.
I set it up. Pandemic happened.
And the pandemic, of
Yeah, that would
course.
have been the most fun road trip in the total nerdly world of writers.
I mean, how often do you think these people get calls like that though? Like people
I
say, "Hey, I am super interested in this and want to learn everything about it."
I have no idea. I don't know. It's kind of goofy.
But that's like, it's so details that really matter though. Like that's
Yeah.
like what builds surrealism into the story.
Yeah. And I think in historical fiction for me, I want people to feel like they're dropped in the world. So they may
Mm,
be like, I don't really get it. I don't get everything in this world.
yeah.
But it's not over described. It's just very, very specific key details that let you
Hmm.
see that world. So those were all done from all these research that I've done
Yeah.
to know what those things were. So I could say, you know, if they're in a house, somebody's going to have a a they're not knit crochet. I don't even know what they're called now. Needlepoint of the family tree will be on the wall
Oh, wow.
somewhere, you know, where
That's
somebody
cool.
will have a horsehair, not horsehair, will have hair that's braided from somebody who's died, and it will be in a
Wait,
little,
what?
yeah, oh yeah,
Hair
this
that's
is the
braided
the
from somebody
Victor
who has
okay,
died?
The Victorians' death things were odd, but the one of them was you'd get the hair and you'd braid it, or you'd make a pretty picture with it and frame it on the wall, or you put it inside of a ring,
Huh.
or braid it like a bracelet, braided hair of your son, say, who died, or your daughter. You'd wear that.
I don't know how I'd feel if I met someone on the street. Hey, I really like your bracelet. What is it? Well,
It's
it's
my
a
dead son's
my dead
hair.
son's hair, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
Go
they've had
over,
some crazy things.
go over to someone's house. Why do you have hair on your wall? Well,
It was an art project I did in summer camp. COVID still, huh?
not yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
no, that
sorry.
was fun. But gosh, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
those things were just normal. I
Hmm.
mean, like
Hmm.
things that we would be like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. But if you look at that time period, death was much closer to everyone. So,
Yeah, it was.
and death was part of life. So, you know, when the person died, you cleaned the body, you wrapped
Oh,
it in
wow.
linens, you laid it on the dining room table, and people came over to give their wishes.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it was just much different. We have really separated from death. So
Yeah.
we become afraid of it because we don't see it right there,
Well,
you
like,
know?
did they have antibiotics back then?
No. So
No.
your first thing that's going to be make you the modern world is penicillin, you know.
Yeah.
That was really the first thing that was going to do it for people. I wouldn't have wanted to live back
Yeah,
then
it's
in
pretty
real life. That
bad.
would be a really harsh life to live. They
Like
wouldn't have thought so though. And that's the
normal for
thing, right?
them.
So I can't normal for them. They were tougher than us for sure. We couldn't do it. I'd be like, "Where is my shower?"
My mom, she has like diaries from like her great grandmother. So it's
Mhm.
like when she homesteaded to
Wow.
America, or not America, but like some random part, and be like, "Yeah, we've been these few days without food, and like, yeah, this kid died, or one of my sons died, and just crazy, horrible things like that."
Yeah.
And it's like,
That's
how
an
did you guys
amazing thing to
live?
have. I mean, that's an amazing book to read.
Yeah,
And that's your family. That's amazing.
yeah. No, she discovered that a couple years ago. We had a relative pass away, and we were going through the
Mhm.
stuff, and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we've just had this.
That's amazing.
But yeah, just it's surreal to think of how life would have been like
Mhm.
back then. I mean, like my
Mhm.
grandparents, they grew up without a floor in Arkansas. Like,
Sure.
I mean, can you just
Is that a
have,
hard packed dirt,
yeah.
right?
I
Yeah.
mean, just it's funny to think of having a carpeted floor as like a luxury.
Yeah.
But
You know, it's like in those weird things you find, like the people I talked to about the depression, they said, "Oh,
mhm.
we didn't have electricity in eastern Colorado till 1957."
Oh
I was like,
wow.
"Excuse me?" They
Oh
said, "Yeah,
what?
1957.
Big year for us.
Big year on the Eastern Plains."
57. That is
Yeah.
like really
Mhm.
late.
Yeah. Very rural out there.
Dang. I can't even just like heat, not having heat, not having electricity. Like,
Yeah. And you
man,
learn really, really specific details. And that's why I always think with writers, go find people and talk to them.
yeah.
You know, no matter who you're writing about, go find because there's really interesting things like the locusts came during the Depression, and the locusts like devastated fields had already
That's like
been
the Dust
devastated by
Bowl
all those
stuff,
the
right?
Dust Bowl. So we
Yeah.
had the Dust Bowl, then the locusts came. So in Colorado, they did a lot of beets, sugar beets. And so
Huh.
when the locusts were coming, they poured banana oil on the fields to get the locusts to, because they didn't like it. So who the
Oh.
hell would know about that,
Who'd come
right?
up with it? Yeah.
Right. It's like I never read that in any book. I wouldn't see
Uh-uh.
that in a book. It was somebody who did it on the farm with his when he
Banana
was a
oil.
kid. Banana oil.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's smart. I mean,
But again, it's those telling
so
details. And
detailed.
anytime, whether you're writing contemporary or historical, that's where you're going to see it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've read drafts of books too. I mean, you have a
Yeah.
writing community, right? And it's like, where is your setting? Where
Yeah.
are they sitting? They're sitting in this sort of blank nothingness.
Mhm.
Or I've read a book that was published once that I had no idea what city it was in because it was so bland. I was like, Chicago was very different than New Orleans.
Quite a bit.
So,
Quite a
you know what
bit.
I mean? So, think about what your city is, but they didn't use one. So all I felt was like that movie Pleasantville, where they had the map on the wall, right? And this road
Yeah.
stops here and this road stops
Back
here.
up there, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's like
yeah, and
each
that was
city
what it
had
was
its
like.
own kind of flavor to it.
And the flavor, I always say that the setting is what changes the character.
Yeah.
So it just imbues them and gives you more actions and reactions the character's going to do.
Well, so like you said you're in the Portland area.
Hmm.
Like if you, Portland versus Seattle, like
Hmm.
similar, close, but I bet they're pretty different. Like if you,
You guys are hipper.
is that what we
We're not
are?
as hip. Yeah, we really are Portlandia, the TV show.
I was about to say you were hipper because of Portlandia.
No. You guys are
Uh,
more like, you have this connection to Vancouver and a
oh,
really
that's
big
true.
Asian influence because so many
Yeah,
Japanese and there's a lot of trade
we do have
in the
that.
in the waters there. So it makes it a very vibrant city,
Mm,
more international feeling. We're not international feeling.
yeah, we have a really big international like districts, and just they really kind of
Hmm.
embrace that whole
Yeah.
thing.
Super
I
interesting.
love Wajimaya and going in that
I
area.
love Uwajimaya. Oh, it's my favorite store. Are you kidding? That's the best store in the world. Um, I agree with you. But so we have one. But yeah, so Portland is like the little brother of Seattle.
Where do you so like 100 years from now, or like 50 years, like say you're researching a historical book around this time period, with like social media and everything being so well documented, do you think
Hmm.
it'll be more easier or more difficult? Like,
Wow, you're right, because this social
yeah,
media would be the historical
I
fiction.
mean, what people are talking about,
Hmm.
what they're literally saying. I mean,
Hmm.
I was just thinking of like firsthand references. Like, imagine you were wanting to do a historical thriller or something on like a president or a celebrity or
Hmm.
something, and you found their tweets. It's
Yeah.
like this is what they were talking about, and yeah,
Yeah. So it would be like me saying, I just found this diary, or you just found the
yeah.
homesteading diary. Oh, this is so cool.
Like Abraham
So
Lincoln just tweeting
yeah, at
at,
first they'd be like, what is a
I'm
tweet?
going to
This
the
is the
theater, gonna
weirdest
have a
thing
great
ever.
time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So people in 50 years from now are gonna be like, what is this tweet thing? That's so
Yeah.
weird. And then they'll figure out how to use it.
But it's just amazing kind of having all that like firsthand information about somebody and just
Hmm.
kind of the pictures. I mean, I imagine there's not a ton of pictures from like 1800s, or I don't know when the
You're
camera
right.
came out.
So you get like about 1850, you started getting the daguerreotype being used. Very
Yeah.
expensive way to take a photo and beautiful photos to this day. They're absolutely
Oh, that's
the
cool.
best type of photo. But they were expensive, so it
Yeah.
was people had to have a lot of money. And then
Mhm.
tintypes came in, and you could buy a kit in from a Sears Roebuck catalog and be your own traveling photographer with a tintype.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
that's when that sort of the masses could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just
And that
yeah,
was
just funny to
started
see
to
how the
become
world
right
changed.
around the Civil War. That's when you started seeing a lot more photos
And
with
those are always
tintypes.
like just surreal to see, aren't they? I mean, like, because Civil War is such
Mhm.
a all. I mean, just a crazy event in American history.
Mhm.
And so actually seeing real photos from that, it's
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
uh, it's
Yeah.
amazing how much people change over the years.
Mhm. Yeah, but I think it's mostly like if you just sit and look at them, like I can get mesmerized just looking at their photos
Yeah.
online and I just keep seeing them. I see the face And in tintypes and that stuff, you look much older than you really are.
Oh, that's
It just
funny.
does something to skin,
Hmm.
and it makes people look really old. So
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, I learned that's what I learned from the guy whose house could blow up any minute. But yeah, it's fascinating.
God. So what is a big tip you might have for like aspiring writers? You know, if you're wanting to write a historical, I'm assuming do you classify that? It's fiction, right?
Hmm.
Okay, I
It's
wasn't sure
fiction.
because it seemed like with historical, it's like on that borderline of his fantasy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What would be a tip you have for somebody starting out?
If this was their first writing
Hmm.
that they were doing, I would say if it's historical, definitely do your research for the era you're in. But what I would really, really recommend is to just write forward. Just write the story out. Don't go back and edit and try and make each chapter perfect and move on, because you'll be doing that for like 10 years if you keep doing that. And you can eventually edit edit it to death. Or you'll say, I'm on chapter 10. That happened to me with a book. I was working on this book that was set in post-war Monterey, California, and I just kept editing and perfecting and editing, and I couldn't move on. It took me 2 years to do 10 chapters. I was like, this is ridiculous because
Being
now
a
I have no book.
perfectionist.
Yeah, and just edit the life out of it. So it's just I say write wild on your first draft, or write the chapter out. Don't worry about it, and then the next day go back and do some very big rough edits. Like I need to spell check, and maybe some of the paragraphs need to move around for
Yeah.
the action sequence. Then move on to the next one so that you're
Mhm.
keeping that momentum going. So I would definitely say that write forward, write wild, and have a deadline. That's really, really important.
Do you like measure? Do you like try to hit a word count every day, or like how do you measure a good
Yeah,
writing day?
well, a good writing day, yes, I try and hit a word count every day. Every day I write. It changes per book. I sometimes each one book I write in the morning, and the next book I write in the afternoon. Sometimes I wrote most of After Alice Fell in a library. I wrote The Deception in this room. I mean, whatever. But I did so much when I was writing the companion to my own deadline.
Mhm.
I had this program on my phone called Write-ometer, and it literally showed me per hour the words that I wrote. So
Oh
I am
wow.
able to figure out exactly how many months it will take me to write a 75 or 85,000 word book at 4 days a week, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
with a month off for, edits.
Yeah,
And I have
that's
days
cool.
that, yeah, so I'll put a word count. Let's say this is what I want to do today, but some days I won't make it. It's struggle.
Some days
The
have, yeah.
scene's not working. It's just really bad. So, and like I literally know, I write 329 words an hour when I suck, and I write 479 when I'm doing well.
That's pretty good though.
Yeah. So because I did all that, it really helps, and it helps me lay out structure to begin with, to say, okay, I'm going to do 10-page chapters, so I'm going to have 30 chapters. So look at my 30 chapters. Where's the middle? Where's the climax and that point of no
Oh
return?
wow,
Yeah. So it's kind of it's like efficient shortcuts. Because remember,
that
your
is.
first book is the only one you have the luxury of no deadline. If you're blessed and that sells, you will have a deadline for the next one. So don't look at it like,
How are
I
the
don't know if I
publishing
can make it.
deadlines?
I think it depends on the
Mm.
publisher. I
Yeah.
couldn't tell. One of my friends, he has 13 months for
Oh,
historical.
okay.
I've had 8 months.
Ooh.
So, but I
It
had,
sounds like a long time, but it's really not.
it's not.
It's
But I
not.
start early. I start early. So part of
Yeah.
it's done for the sample, and part of it I've written the synopsis, and part of it I've
Mm,
done a bunch of research. So when
okay.
I get there, it's still like running, 90 miles an hour at a brick
You're
wall.
moving to hit that
Yeah,
deadline.
the last month is like, I'm never gonna make it. This book is never I'm gonna have to call my editor and cancel my contract. This is just I can't do it.
Oh, that's such a bad
Everyone,
feeling.
yeah, it's a
Uh,
bad feeling, but you
uh,
make it. You make it, and it's from teaching yourself and knowing how your writing process, and not I tend to beat myself up and I say, don't do that. That's the other, don't do that. Don't beat yourself up. Some
Do
days
you
are
still
good
have those
writing days
days
and
where
some
you're
days
like,
aren't.
maybe I'm not a writer? And then you have to
Yeah,
look
every
at your
day.
3 books
Oh
on the
yeah,
shelf. Well,
every day. Every day. Yeah,
that's
every
all.
day. I
It's
look at that blank screen. I'm like, oh my God.
what
I
am I
spent
going to do here?
when I was at VoucherCon at the writing conference, I spent a chunk of that time saying, I have a hotel room, it's quiet. I'm going to write because I have to finish this book that I'm doing right now. And I wrote for 2 days and I went to the airport early so I could just sit and write for hours. And all of it is dreck. I'm going to throw it all out. Right. It's
Well, at
like, I'm
least you
so
wrote
glad. I'm so
something.
glad for that. I wrote and I'm going to throw it all out. It's sort of like anxiety ridden. And it just is the way it is, right? It's just the way
It's like you
writing
can
works.
tell when like I was stressed out while writing this.
I
Mm.
can tell, but when you all put it all together, you can never tell.
Yeah. I think that's
What
like a
was,
Hemingway quote. It's like you can't tell the difference between the good days and the bad days when it's all together.
yeah. Another thing that's really fun to do if you're stuck is do a thesaurus prompt. So just get the thesaurus out, fan through it and point at something. Just close your eyes and point at a word, and then write down that word and 2 synonyms and make yourself use them in a write. Just start writing your
That's
story
smart.
and put those in,
That's a
and it
good
will get you
that's a fun
going.
idea actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
In the companion, there's two chapters that are thesaurus prompts. When I was like, I don't know what to do in this chapter, so
This
I
word,
know where they're
this
at,
word, let's do
and
it.
that was it. Yeah,
It's
and I
amazing the
know
little
where they're at
tricks
in the
that can
book.
get you through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah,
Dang, so
super
is it
fun.
surreal still like looking back? Like, I mean, as you were writing, like, did you ever think that you'd have 3 going on 4 books coming out?
No. I also didn't realize how much work it was. It's a tremendous amount of work, more than any
No.
other job I've ever had. And but even though I wake up every day and I go, it's not really work. It's just like I do developmental editing too.
Mm,
That's not really work. And I
yeah.
have a writing community. That's not really work. Writing the book is not really work. Researching is not really work. But if I look at my day, it's a heck of a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. What
Yeah.
is your writing community? Is that the woman's?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's no, that's a group I belong to. It's called Novelitics, and it's for novelists and memoirists mostly. And we started during the pandemic, the first week of
Mm,
shutdown. I had been facilitating workshops in person, and I was like, what are we going to do now? So I just wrote an email to some people and said, let's get on Zoom Wednesday at 4:30 because I'm weirded out by this lockdown. Let's just see how
uh,
we're all doing. So that first one was just like,
oh,
hi,
that's
hi,
cool.
hi. But now it's like a whole thing. It's like we have people who
Oh,
have
wow.
joined from all over the country, Canada, and people just recommend other writers. And we still have the Wednesday night, which is just we all meet the same 4:30 Pacific time, and it's craft or we
That's
critique
awesome.
something or we do some writing. And we have morning Monday through Friday is morning write-in where you just show up and I give a prompt and we write. And
That's
then
so
there's
cool.
monthly workshops that we have that I do or I have guest people do. So it's
Yeah.
become like a really cool business. And so, I'd love anybody if they want to check it out. It's novelitics.com and
Novel.
30
You should
30
drop a
days
link in my
free.
I told you I have
You,
like a Facebook group, didn't I?
you did not.
Okay,
I
so I
need
have
to
a
drop a
Facebook
link.
group of writers, about 103,000
Okay.
people. Um, and I see people asking for this actually all the time. Like, we should all
Yeah.
start a Zoom thing together and talk writing. And like, I see that all the time. So I bet they
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. I would love that. I mean, it's a really supportive, good group. And, there's people in it who had been just starting their first book and they're now
Yeah.
done and submitting. And
Wow.
then there's also published writers in it, multiply published writers. There's some nonfiction writers. There's some self-published writers. There's traditionally published
Mm,
writers. So the amount of support and help and advice is unbelievable.
that's incredible. Like
Yeah.
everyone, you have all the bases covered.
hmm
That's
hmm
so
And
cool.
just everyone is so supportive of each other's success, and that's really important to me in any group.
Mm. It
So
really
yeah,
does
I'll
make
drop a
such a
link
big
in that.
difference. just having that supportive community around you.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
Exactly.
no, I'll pin that in our group because like I said, I've seen so many posts, people asking for something
I'll
just like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll send you over the link and a graphic so you have
Perfect.
those. Awesome.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me. This has been amazing speaking with you.
I had a wonderful time. You are amazing.
Thank you. Where can people buy your books?
People can buy them at any bookstore they want to go to and at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target if you wish.
How did that okay, I gotta ask, how did it feel like going into a Target or some bookstore and seeing your book on the shelf?
Well, most of my books, because I'm with Lake Union, is an Amazon imprint, thick
Okay.
of Amazon publishing. So most of our sales are digital.
Oh,
So
interesting.
but when I was doing young adult books, I would go in and see my book on the shelf. So
It's
that's
real.
fun. Yeah. It's like, it's there. That's so interesting. Yeah. I just got yesterday the box of audio books came. So
Oh, that's
I'm like,
cool.
oh, this is so cool. And the two narrators that do the two women are spectacular.
Oh,
So if
that's
people like
awesome.
audiobooks,
Are you like,
that's
"That's how are you like, "That's how I thought they sounded" in your head, kind of?
they were, and I don't normally have that happen, but they were
Mhm.
like exactly their voices.
Oh, that's cool.
And same with the woman who narrated after Alice
Mm,
fell. I mean, I've just been very lucky with narrators, so
yeah.
it's good.
Awesome. Well, I will put links in the description below where people can check out your books and your social
Thank you
media
so
and all
much.
sorts of stuff.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for joining me.
It was an honor.